environmental journal. And my specialty was actually environmental journalism. But I was also taken to indigenous art and those people and indigenous knowledge, and documented a part of the life of mountain dwellers who in Sinai area. Maybe we can talk more about that later. But I was born 1961, so until 1996, I didn't know what's an internet. I had no email. I didn't understand what's an email. So all my life was, was amongst books and amongst friends who have the same interests, which is, they call it in political science, the intelligentsia of Cairo, or the intellectual community of Cairo. We shared books. We had novels that were smuggled from Lebanon to Egypt because they are not to be printed in Egypt. And one of them was actually Awlad Haritna, the Children of the Alley by Naguib Mahfouz. So we used to read it, we buy it from the black market for the price of the photocopy, and we just read and discuss. And this is the kind of police state, even in the time of Sadat, until 1981, or no, in 1986, and and even Mubarak afterwards. A part of your formation as an intellectual is to read literature. And Naguib Mahfouz was the king of realism during that time. And he is still, unparalleled in some ways. So we had to read it. We started with the Prohibited, the banned novel of Awlad Haritna, of the Children of the Alley, in which he clearly challenges the idea of God the dictator. No matter what happens after that and whatever he says, it is about challenging the power that is not fair, power that decides for you what to do and how to eat and how to live and whom do you marry. And he was from the beginning a man with existential concern. He had some Sufi attitudes as well, a very sensitive writer. And after that, the first piece to read was the trilogy. The Palace Walk is the first book in Naguib Mahfouz's Cairo trilogy, and he completed it in 1952. However, when he presented it as a trilogy to Abdelhamid Gouda Sahar, the very famous novelist and also realist and also publisher, when he gave him the trilogy, he actually refused to print it as one novel. And he said it's huge to read. And Mahfouz got almost in depression because of that. However, the Palace Walk was published at that time, followed by the Palace of Desire or Qasr al-Shawq, and then As-Sukkariya. They translated it as Sugar Street. However, talking about the name of Palace Walk, Bain al-Qasrain, or literally between the two palaces, it doesn't really mean between the two palaces. It means Bain al-Qasrain. It's a neighborhood in the Gamaliya in Egypt. Gamaliya is a piece of art that keeps a lot of the architectural features of Mamluk Egypt, medieval Egypt. And it is a place of a middle-class family at that time. We're talking here 1917 until 1919. This is the historical background that we are talking about. And in a nutshell, I will explain why is this time so important. But before I do that, I'd like to tell you that Egypt was occupied by the British Empire. And they started the occupation in 1882. They promised us independence, but after World War I, they declared Egypt a protectorate, and that was in 1914. And then after their victory in the World War I, the British refused to give up on my country, and Egyptians, motions and the fair request for for having an independent country became a movement. It was a national movement, and then demonstrations erupted in 1919 to the point that 800 people at that time, that's a very big number, were actually killed. So the British were not, when it comes to situations like this, the occupation had no mercy. However, I wouldn't say that it was a barbaric occupation. I mean, they did a lot of good stuff, but always to serve their interests, the Egyptian cotton and the strategic geographical position of Egypt, and so many other reasons. At that time, in 1919, we had a party, a political party. It was a royalty. Egypt was ruled by a king. But the leader of that patriotic party called Al-Wafd, or the delegation, if you want to translate the word, the leader, who is Saad Zaghloul, his name will show up in the novel, by the way, put together some kind of a delegation, and he wanted to go, out of Egypt and ask in Europe for the independence of the country. His plan was to present the case to world leader at Paris Peace Conference. And what happened? The British authorities took Saad Zaghloul and his delegation, and they sent them to exile in Malta. But this made things worse, and they had to bring him back and to get some kind of a deal for their stay in the country. But they didn't read Egyptians well, because it was the time for them to get out, and they got out. But I'm not here to speak about the historical sequence of events. I'm just telling you, between 1917 and 1919, Egypt was speaking politics. Mothers and women in houses who had never had an education were able to discuss politics. For the first time in these demonstrations of 1919, women went out and they made their chants against the British occupation. And that is a turning point when it comes to women's freedom of expression. However, so when you read this novel and you hear some talks about politics inside the family, because we're talking here about actually the plot of this novel is the family itself. The plot is concerned with the lives and the relations of those family members, and how, I wouldn't call it family politics, but how the hierarchy is like in the family, how the decision making is done, how the individual lives within a unit of a family, and how the historical stream of conscience goes well with the talk of the characters, with the conversation, with the events. So this interwoven relation between the characters of the novel and history, the conflict at the historical level between the tyranny of the British and the scream for freedom and the tyranny of Abd al-Jawad, the father, the dictator. But I wouldn't say if he is evil or good. I would refrain from doing this because I don't want to judge him ethically, because using ethics to evaluate artistic work is very unfair. So we read literature as it is, without judgmental, without making judgments using the optics of ethics. However, we cannot deny that his behavior in the family, as you read from the first chapters, is unacceptable by our standard now, and is not acceptable by those who lived in 1919 as well. But did the girls Khadija, and Aisha, did they hate their father? No, they feared him, but they didn't hate them. And that's what I like in the way that Mahfouz draws his pictures. Mahfouz is a realist. He believes in this literary approach. And for him, there's nothing black and white. There is a whole spectrum of colors. And Abd al-Jawad is Abd al-Jawad. He's a human being who lived by the norms of his society. He had a good heart for his children, but he also had schizophrenia. He played two faces. He was the committed husband in the house. He did whatever he wanted outside of the house. And this is what we are going to look at today. I actually found some nice questions from a reader online that was actually poses questions, and then I'm using such questions to guide myself and guide the discussion into the analysis of the characters of this novel, and also the plot itself. And so those who read the first few chapters or the first half of the Palace Walk, they realize by now that the theme of authority is the striking theme, and the hierarchy in family. We see Amina from the beginning wakes up at dawn with her two daughters. Why? Baking bread, fixing breakfast. They didn't have enough sleep. That's fine. That's the norm. That's their duty. This is how it works. The three women will prepare the food for the entire family. The males will be eating first. There is an etiquette in which a man is here and a woman is a bit below within the same family. And this is a big question. Are we now away from this nonsense? I don't think so. As a man who left his home country, my homeland, now America is my second home for sure. But I have seen in the 2011 revolution, people going into the streets asking for the big tyrant, all right, Mubarak, to leave the office and for democracy to take place. The same people would not adopt the idea of democracy inside their own family. A man, a boy, is in an advantageous position to his sister. He goes into the house and the mom says, what? Go fix some food for your brother. Why? Why she should do that? Wash your brother's clothes. Why? Why is he giving certain rights that are not given to the brother? I'm talking here lower middle class and below, and sometimes it's upper middle class and above. It's a common practice. So the perception is that I cannot be that democratic with my son as I am democratic with my daughter now and in the 21st century. And these norms are not fading away. For sure, with education and with empowering women's status, the situation gets better. But we are not yet there. There is a lot to be done for women to lead their life, make their decision the way they like, and to be treated equally in the Arab world. That was just a hint or a line of thought that I wanted to highlight. So you can see from what you have read until now, the first half of the novel is that that concept of authority is woven into the line of maturation of the children of Abdel Jawad and the wider political circumstances of the revolution of 1919. So it's important for you as a reader to look at this as the temporal boundaries of the plot and the temporal boundaries of the novel itself. Forgive me because I don't use really academic jargons in my talk. I am a broad thinker and I am not a literary analyst. I am someone whose the novel has become part of him, it has been internalized, not only this novel, but tons of other literature. And I am now sharing with my friends in the library how I perceived this novel, how I see it. I will leave the literary theory and the theoretical framework for specialists, but I'm speaking about literature as a mirror of life, as a reflection of history, and hopefully we can make a layer of, socio-political layer under the events that we read in this novel, which will deepen and enrich our reading and our feeling for the characters. All right, so so I can see, from the first few pages, you see that there were women looking at people walking in the street through that mashrabiya, the latticed screen on the house balcony. And this is their window to the world. This is the only fun that they can have. In addition to doing whatever they do in the house, probably Khadija and Aisha had no idea how to read. Because the right to go to the right of a girl to go to school was not really, I would say, adopted at a large scale at that time. Of course, there were people going to, there were women who received education, but the real liberation of women did not come at that time. And the question you would ask to yourself, do they feel imprisoned? Of course they do. Of course she wishes to enjoy another life. We see them after marriage. I don't want to burn, as we say it in Arabic. I don't want to spoil the story to those who are going with the second and the third part. But at a certain stage, one of the girls were more afraid of facing her dad because she had a family dispute with her husband. So this inner fear instilled in her did not go by leaving this man's house and getting into another man's house who could have been softer and nicer. It's her husband. If you look at Amina, the woman figure in the beginning of the novel, you can see that she is in absolute submission to him. She knows that he knows other women, but she doesn't speak a word. And she is in absolute love with Al-Hussein, the religious figure, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad. And she likes to go to the shrine. And when he went to Port Said in a trip, her kids told her, "Hey, mom, get out. This is the sweetness of those children. They are all coerced. They cannot ask for her to go out of the house. She can go out of the house, but not without his permission. And if she does so, there are consequences." She goes out, as you read in the novel, to see Al-Hussein because she believes that Al-Hussein is her intercessor. And we have no time to speak about the power of religion and the spirituality in the East. Especially when it comes to intercessors, Al-Hussein, Sayyidah Fatima, Sayyidah Aisha, and how these shrines are perceived as holy places, even by Sunni Muslims. The issue of shrine is more common in Shiite Islam rather than Sunni Islam. But Amina's bad luck causes her to have an accident, breaking her collarbone. After having that spiritual ecstasy through her prayers and callings to Al-Hussein when she was in Al-Hussein. And now she had a broken collarbone, and her kids find a solution to fix the bone, but and they keep on, telling her, when he asks you, you are not going to tell the truth. Memorize with me, say that. And the simple saint, as I call her, she couldn't just lie. And with the first question, she admits that she went out of the house without his permission. So he allows her in the house until she gets healed. But what happened? What happened is the power balance is not now in his favor. He has to prove that he has the final word in this house, and she broke this word. So he sends her to her mom. You may read this, and it passes easily. Oh, he sent her to her mom's house. No, it's a big insult. She has kids who are at college at this time. We know that Fahmi was at the law school. And she had girls who are ready for marriage. This is her kingdom. This is her house. No. You should remember, that's Abdul Jawad's voice. Abdul Jawad's voice. No, you should remember that I am here, the reference of this house. And you did something wrong. The problem when you read is that you feel that she is in pain because of her physical injury, but also in shame. This sense of guilt is a huge problem in raising women in the Middle East. This is how you should dress. This is how you should sit. This is how you should talk. You should not talk to boys. You should do that. You should not do that. Fine. What about the boys? What are the constraints that you impose on them? Nothing. And this is how the divide became bigger and bigger as of today. But the good news is that the level of education of women raised so high, so she started to say, no, I am here, and I'm going to say what I want. And if you even think of marrying another woman, I can tell you, no, I disagree, and I want divorce. But back to the novel. Sayyid Ahmad Abd al-Jawad, the core character, the father, the patriarch of the novel. If you go to page 220, he's described by Mahfouz as a man known to his family for his ferocity and anger. His character is double-sided. That's 240, page 240. And the question is, did Ahmed Abdel Jawad, as a man, see himself as a hypocrite? He always saw himself as a person who has the rights. He's the breadwinner of the family, and he aims good at his kids. He decides for them what's to be done. He raised these kids to go to college. He raised his girls with purity, all right? We can talk about honor and shame in the Arab world in another talk, especially for a woman. Losing virginity at that time, and as of today, is a big risk. The punishment could be death. And if it is not a physical death, it is death by an unfair society. And no one blames whoever made her pregnant, or any girl, but the blame comes on her. It's all on her. What's her problem? She loved him, and she gave him herself. Where is him? Where is why is this something that deserves the punishment of death? If you go to Upper Egypt, it's still something that is practiced by some families. But it gives you an idea about the sense of shame and sense of guilt that you receive as a girl from day one. And that's what we need to liberate women in the East from. There's nothing wrong about you. Even at the religious realm, she is perceived as unclean if she has her days of the month. Why? Why do you judge her as unclean? This is a physiological function. And why does she believe that? That's the power of the norms and society in the Middle East that needs to be changed. But we are not here to talk about changing the society. We are just discussing who is this Ahmed Abdel Jawad. And again, I'm not asking him to love him or to hate him, but I'm asking you to read literature the way it is and to react to it, not only using, with a broader vision of the whole situation. Am I saying that his relationship with his family make him easy for a reader to like? Absolutely no. Of course, if we apply our judgment rules or ethical rules or even common sense on his personality, we will not like him. But believe me, even people as of today can read the novel and see the bright side of Ahmed Abdel Jawad, and also see the dark side of Ahmed Abdel Jawad. Back to the issue of Amina, you may have read that event and you let it go, and you said it's unfair, but remember that disobedience is a big crime. No, I wouldn't call it crime, but what is disobedience? Disobedience is a court ruling. If you decide to leave your husband's house and go live with your family because he literally abuses you as a woman, he has the right to keep you for life without marriage. And he has the right to call you through the court in what we call obedience ruling. And if she refuses, probably 2 or 3 times, to go back to the house of marriage, the home of marriage, she would be labeled legally as a disobedient woman. And this means her chance of getting married is 0. We have a very famous movie called Uridu Hallan, I Want a Solution. Look at the title of the movie. It's by Fatin Hamama. And the plot of the movie is about a woman, an educated woman, who married a man who was so abusive at all levels. And she decided, I can't take this anymore. She left him. She went to court. She asked for divorce, and she spent 20 years. Or, I mean, it was an endless scream. And even the movie ends with a scream of that woman. Why? Because if he doesn't want to divorce, she will not be out of the marriage lock. However, this situation changed probably 10 years ago, when Suzanne Mubarak, the first woman, wife of Mubarak, created a new law that empowers women. It's a fair law, and it's an unfair law. Let me give a hint about it. It's called al-khula. It is the power of a wife to say to her husband, goodbye, I don't like you anymore, I am divorced, and she can take it from the court. And this is beautiful. The only drawback is that she has to give up on the money, on the house, on every gift he gave to her, on her own children. It's a good law for women who are well educated. In her 40s, in her whatever, I mean, when the kids are independent enough, and she can earn her own, she can feed herself, she is independent, she is educated, then al-khul' law works. But what if she is helpless? What if the kids are young and she cannot leave them? Then she cannot use al-khul'. However, I do believe that the situation improved in Egypt. The percentage of divorce is so high, and I think it is the same percentage in the USA. Let me get back to the novel, but I couldn't just look at Amina with that sense of guilt. She felt I did something wrong by going out without informing my husband. And actually had no phone at that time. I mean, telephones were not available even for a middle-class family at that time. We got to have the TV at 1961. Before that, we had no TV. And many of you would feel how I feel when we saw our black and white TV for the first time, as children. Let me here speak a little bit about what time is it? Oh my God, it's 7:37. Okay, Heather will make me. I have a lot to say, but I have to wait, and let me talk for another 5 to 10 minutes. Is that okay, Heather?
That is okay with me, yes.
Okay. If you go to the novel, I'm not going to exceed the limits here, but I would like to look into this parallel of family politics and democracy. And I would like you to think, to use these optics while you are reading, which is, when you are reading this story and you are engaged of a family whose lives are bound by a set of conventions and expectations that are absolutely different from your own, what kind of judgment are you going to make, okay, about these characters and the events in the book? But I would like you to keep in mind that ideas about individual freedoms are not wholly relevant in Mahfouz's world. When we go to page 374, back to the parallel between the family's life and the daily life in the Egyptian society under occupation, you will see the mom, who is uneducated, asking a very good question. She's telling him, she's talking to Fahmi. Fahmi is the nationalist, is the pure spirit, is is the one who is ready to sacrifice his life for the cause of freedom. And she is telling her son, a people ruled by foreigners. Oh, he's telling he's telling his mom saying, a people ruled by foreigners has no life. But my question to Fahmi, what about your dad, Fahmi? What about the tyrant? Why it is acceptable to do that? It is more complex than just the right of freedom of speech. He is his dad. There is a bright side in this dad, but the dad is giving himself rights that don't go for even for anyone in the family. And if it goes, it will go to Yasin, his first son, who is a copy of him, who loves women and who also cheats on his wife, as you will read in the future. And Amina argues, but we are still alive. Look at her talk. Even though they have been ruling us, she's talking about the British, for a long time, son. They do not kill us, which is true. Even though they killed many in Dun Shuai, and it's another story. But to be fair, they were not like a barbaric, murderous occupation. And she goes on, they don't kill us and they don't interfere with the mosques. For her, the mosques and where she formally speaks with God is the most important. It's the most important thing. Don't touch on that. As I am free to go and worship, let the British rule us. That's her discourse. She goes on, the community of Muhammad is still thriving. That's on page 374. And here, that's her concept of freedom. It's good that we are alive. It's good that we are not being killed. And the same applies to how she perceives the tyranny of Ahmad Abd al-Jawad. So the issue of acceptance of tyranny of the male on the female is something that was not argued at that time. It was not Fahmi who stood for his mom, but he stood for his country. And the moment of his death, if you go to page 451, when the narrative shows us what Abd al-Jawad meant for his children, he's saying, I wanted them to be a breed apart outside the framework of history. He alone would set their course for them. Actually, it was the narrative of Mahfouz himself, describing and analyzing after 451 pages who is Abd al-Jawad, what was inside him. Again, Abd al-Jawad was saying, what he meant for his children, to be a breed apart outside the framework of history. He alone would set, Abd al-Jawad alone would set their course for them. Page 451. Abd al-Jawad did not realize that the moment of martyrdom or killing of his beloved, educated, straightforward son, straight, in manners, it's not a womanizer like Yasin. The moment of death of Fahmi was a moment of liberation. Look at the plot. If I am writing this novel, I wouldn't touch this guy. He is the pure expression of struggle for freedom. He's committed. His love to his neighbor, who did not dare to speak to her, was very romantic and very pure, not like Yasin. But Fahmi died and got liberated from the stigma of the British occupation and the tyranny of his dad at the same time. So it is perceived as a moment of liberation. And here you put freedom versus death. It shouldn't be like this, not for men nor for women. And I will have to stop here. I can speak for 6 hours, but I am limited by time. And these were the thoughts that came across my mind during this discussion. Maybe we can continue later. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Okay, I am just going to open it up. I know that a lot of you have questions. I'm going to make it a gallery. I'm trying to figure out the best way. Maybe just unmute yourself if you want to, or raise your hand. I will try to see you. Anyone have any questions that they want to ask right now? Okay, I see one.
Tina is here.
Hi, I have a question that I've had since we started reading this book about censorship, because I happen to know a playwright from Cairo before the revolution, before the Arab Spring uprising. And she said they always had to dance around the censor to get stuff they wanted to get in their plays. And so I'm sure it was doubly or triply that much so when he was writing. Are you aware of what censorship he had to endure?
I know that Colonel Nasser spoke to his, media man, Muhammad Hassanin Haikel, and also the Minister of I'lam, of let's call it media, who was a real educated man and a friend of Mahfouz. And he asked him about not this novel, but his first novel, with Children of the Alley, because uptight religious movement represented by the Muslim Brotherhood and others actually had attacked him in a brutal way, that he is criticizing God, represented by the main character in his plot of Awlad Haritna, his first famous novel. And Haikel, the minister and the person whom Colonel Nasser Gamal Abdel Nasser trusts, said to him, no, he didn't mean any of that. It's very symbolic. We know that he meant that. But even Mahfouz denied that, because the price he paid years after, he was attacked by one of those, ISIS-like, mindset people, and he was attacked by a knife that caused him partial paralysis in his 80s, and that was the outcome of brainwashing people about that he is calling for atheism and things like that, not being committed to religion, not being believer of God. But my point here is, after the pressure, and Nasser was a very strong political leader, but he couldn't resist the pressure. So he came back and he said he will have to submit his novel, which is the first novel, not this novel, to Al-Azhar, which is the religious and fatwa, religious opinion producing body in Egypt, in Cairo. And they said, no, this should not be published. So the whole, published, all the novels were collected from the streets, from the libraries, from the, book stands, and it was burnt. This is the power of censorship in Egypt. As of today, you can criticize anything, but never ever criticize the president of the state. For Mubarak, he had no problem to criticize, even God, but to touch on the president, it's unheard of. I hope I answered the question.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I was.
You're welcome.
That was great. Thank you. I have a list: Connie, Suzanne, Anna, and then Susan. So Connie first.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really grateful for your comments about the position of women at that time and nowadays. And because of that, I'm really surprised that Mahfouz started the novel with the whole first chapter about Amina. And I believe that writers do things deliberately and they want to give a message through their story. Why do you think he started out the story of the family with Amina?
I think the silent suffering of Amina has touched him. And Mahfouz was into women's liberation. And it's a very difficult and important question at the same time, because when it comes to literature, it becomes very difficult to really dissect the emotions of the writer and be sure about his priorities. But it's clear that he was very unhappy with the status of surrender that Amina has. And he was also sympathizing with her. Amina is not just a literary figure. Amina is most of the mothers of the generation of Mahfouz. So he saw that. He saw how women were treated unfairly, and he started to put her in the spotlight. That's my interpretation, but we can have a lot of debate about that as well. Thank you so much. It's a very powerful question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Suzanne.
Thank you for being here, and thank you to the library for bringing this book to us. It's a wonderful book to be reading. It's confusing and
Susan
challenging.
Levy? Which Susan?
Would everyone mute, please, other than Suzanne?
Oh, Suzanne, pardon me.
So, and I'm challenged in many ways with this book, trying to understand, okay, the story is in 1917, it was written in 1957, it was translated in 1997, and really trying to understand the history of the text itself. But one of my biggest questions is, this is Mahfouz is a man trying to tell a woman's story. And I'm really curious as to whether or not there are women who have written over this same period of time who are actually telling this story about this society from a woman's point of view.
No, I have no, that's also a very, very deep, thoughtful question. No. We don't see literary work done by women with this size and with this courage and with this, I mean, getting into the theme itself. But this is also another outcome of unfair treatment of women. I mean, until Ihsan Abdul Quddus, who came in the same era, but probably, let's say 20 years after Mahfouz, who spoke openly about women's relations and desires. And the entire country went upside down because they found a man who can really understand how they feel and what they want, and who is actually expressing the wild desire of a woman. That was Ihsan Abdul Quddus, but not Naguib Mahfouz. I mean, to cut it short, yeah, I'm not aware of women who produced the same level of literature during that time. Remember, women were not educated at that time. They were deprived of education. And they didn't have equal rights like men. Probably they didn't have the right of voting at that time. So, no, there is no voice of a woman. But now you have hundreds, if not, I mean, hundreds of women voices in poetry, in short story, in blog sites. I have read a lovely collection that came from a blog site. I read it with one of my students in an independent study. It's called Rice Pudding for Two People. And it's just a lovely young woman writing about her daily life in Cairo and every tiny problem that she faces, and so maybe we can read it. You can read it later. But yeah, now the women literature flourished. Then women literature was dead compared to the production of men.
Thank you. That was great. Anna.
thank you so much for being here and expanding this window that Mahfouz is giving us here in Evanston into a world that most of us don't know anything about. And so I'd like you to amplify from your knowledge as a Cairo native, more about this culture. Can you talk a little bit about the class structure at this time? We see the structures of gender power dynamics, but there seem to be class issues at work that I at least don't fully understand. And one other additional question about religion. I want to think of this patriarch as a kind of representative figure of a patriarchal male. And yet we learn from his friends that he is more rigid than they are in the control of his family. Can you talk a little bit? Apparently he is a believer in a sect, Hanafi, may have that wrong. How does he differ from his friends in his control of his household?
His commitment to religion is separated from his commitment to his family and from his personal desires as well. This is how he led his life. That's Abdul Jawad. And I'm not so sure if I understand the scope of the question, because it looks like it's too big for me, but I understand that you were asking, I mean, talking about class. Before I talk about class, look at Khadija and Aisha, the two daughters of Abdul Jawad. One of them is young and beautiful, the other is older and less beautiful. Somebody came to ask for the hand of Aisha, and Abdul Jawad is like, no. This is, I will never allow this. Why? Because she's the young, and the norm in the family is that the older should get married before the younger one, no matter what. He will give up on this norm when she has another, another man coming to the Shawkat, from the Shawkat family, asking for her hand. But it gives you an idea that the issue of class is even appreciated and respected within the family. The older sister cannot be left as a sinister while the younger sister gets married. The older sister has a priority when it comes to marriage. So this gives you an idea about how is the world outside of this family. At that time, we had a society based on ranking. So there was a pasha, who is the owner of, it was a feudal system. And then you go down to the bey or bey, and then with an educated person with a little bit of less fortune than the pasha. And then comes the effendi, and this is someone who has got at least a high school education. And then comes the farmers and the labor class. So it was dramatically a society based on class differences. And everybody knows his class and his position. So yes, you are educated, then you are higher. That's the perception. You see what I mean? And that was the type of any conservative society, not necessarily in the Arab world. Educated versus uneducated, rich versus poor. So it was dramatically a society based on hierarchy and the division between classes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, actually, this will be the final question. I'm sorry. Okay, Susan, your question.
Susan, you are mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much. This has been really fascinating. I really am so curious about what motivated you to come to the US. And then also, and this is, I can't help but ask you this. I hope this is okay. this was a book written in 1956 in Egypt. There's a lot of explicit sex. And how did that go? Was it censored, or how was that received?
First of all, people are people everywhere. And if Abdul Jawad wants to have a nightlife, he can find it. But his mother, his wife cannot find it. That's number one. Number two, why did I come to the States? I would tell you, Susan, this is the best thing that happened ever in my life. Because you breathe freedom here. And I really become a bit frustrated when I see my students are presenting the American culture as if it is a culture of injustice, lack of freedom. And hey, and I ask, have you ever been outside of the States? Do you know how we live? Do you know how it is like outside of the States? So just to conclude, I had a special reason and I have a general reason. The special reason was that my son had also a big problem, shunts in his brain, and he needed medical attention, but he never came with me. He was there and they were here. They were there at home waiting for, they joined me after 6 months. And I came basically to study and to finish a PhD. I came invited by the Fulbright Commission as a journalist. It was a mid-career professional invitation to meet with people in the same specialty, which is environmental journalism in Washington, and to get to know and get more training. When I ended up staying at Cornell University and being offered to do a master's degree. And then I brought my family. And when my wife came here and we lived here, and it was not an easy life in the beginning, it was very limited resources compared to the style of life we had in Egypt. But we both agreed, no, we will stay in the States if possible. And we stayed. It's this atmosphere of freedom that you have here. It is a place where you guarantee that your son will not and your daughter will not be persecuted for any reason, neither gender nor any other reason. So we loved it. We loved America, and we are enjoying it. We have not lost the elements of our original culture. We are still Egyptian inside and sometimes outside, but we are also American. I hope I answered you, but we need a couple of hours to tell you.
Thank you. That was so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan, for asking me. Yeah.
Okay, we've come to the end. Everyone can unmute and say thank you. We so appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.